Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? Come on, louder. How are you guys doing? More like it. So I'm extremely excited to have the Madam Vice President of the European Union here on stage with us. Very much welcome and thank you for doing this.
I'm very happy to be here.
Before I have to say Madam Vice President every time, can I just call you Henna?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Let's jump right in, if it's okay with you. Yesterday there was a whole announcement around the omnibus, the simplification of GDPR, AI. Like, what actually happened yesterday for the people who were busy with Slush?
We are very committed as a European Commission that we want to make Europe faster and easier and simpler for the businesses. And all of us as a commissioners, we have to look our own sectors, that how we can cut bureaucracy and red tape and simplify the things. And yesterday I published my first digital simplification package. And there we are especially addressing our data rules, our cybersecurity rules and AI Act. Not like downgrading our rules, but simplifying the things and clarifying the things, cutting extra red tape and reporting obligations. For example, in data, we have 4 different legislations in data. And now we were combining everything under Data Act, and we were simplifying and clarifying the use of data, access to data. And also, for example, under GDPR, we were clarifying that the base to European Court of Justice decision that, for example, when there's personal data, but the people can't be identified by this data, it's not personal data. And that's why now it's much easier also to use this data for innovations and for AI, for example. And with cybersecurity also, we were cutting reporting obligations and making sure that in the future, stakeholders, they are just reporting to one channel, because now we have 5 different places to report incidents. And also with AI Act, we were also announcing a few targeted amendments to AI Act. For example, we want to create European sandboxes to test innovations in real life. And also we were announcing that we want to postpone also the high-risk AI Act, this part. It should come into the force on next August, but we were postponing that.
So what does this mean for the startups here? So you mentioned before that data for AI would be easier to use. Is this like one of the direct outcomes you want to achieve?
I think it's one of the most important things now for the innovative startups who need really data to create innovations and who are working with AI, that we were clarifying now also the rules that how you can use data. And we want to really facilitate now better data sets for innovators and also make sure that you have access to data.
I don't want to dream too big here, but does this also mean that cookie banners maybe will be...
That's right. That's right. Now also we want to get rid out of cookie banners, and we will also now...
Guys, please.
Yeah. So we were also including it under GDPR now, and it means that with one click you can agree or not agree, and next 6 months it should be remembered. So it's not asking every time, your permission.
Is there a timeline to get rid of the cookie banners at all?
Yes, of course, as soon as possible, because now yesterday I proposed, and the European Commission, we were proposing these changes to our legislation, and now European Parliament and our member states, they have to agree on that. So hopefully we will have a very fast decision-making process now.
As an engineer, or ex-engineer now as investor, I really look forward to not implementing cookie banner anymore. Miki, for you, GDPR as a founder, what does this mean for you actually, at scaling Europe? How does this sound to you?
Yeah, I think we are a 3-sided marketplace. So obviously we have 3 sides of users that we need to think about when it comes to privacy and GDPR, and then our employees on top. So I don't think there's probably a single startup in this room today that wouldn't have to deal with GDPR to an extent. And I think if we're able to basically get to a place where we take care of the most important thing, which is privacy, but at the same time we do it in a way that is something that's manageable for companies to work on, especially young companies and small companies that don't have the resources of what we, for instance, have today to deal with these topics. That's a really, really big topic. The biggest worry I've had is that the bigger you become as a company, the easier it is for you to deal with regulation, because you have a lot of smart people that are trying to figure out what is the right way to operate and how you operate in a complicated regulatory setup. It's the startups and the new companies that suffer the most.
It's the complexity you can absorb, right? This is also way to actually like paradoxically easier for massive American companies to establish themselves here versus our own companies because they're already big enough to absorb it, right?
Exactly, and like especially when we're going through like an industrial revolution as we are going through today, like everything is going online, everything online is getting smarter. It is really, really crucial that we are like a place where it's really easy to start building new companies from scratch, because like a lot of these changes are going to come from companies that haven't been founded yet.
Yep.
And if we make it regulatorily too difficult too early, what it's going to mean is we leave all these industries to incumbent large companies, or even worse, we're not getting these companies at all, which means consumers and businesses and Europe as a whole is going to be worse off. So very much a fan of the work that Henna is doing.
Yeah, and of course I have to also mention that yesterday I was just proposing the first simplification package. So yesterday we also launched a new process, so-called digital fitness check, and it means now that we are going to have more deep dive to all our digital rules, and I'm also very much welcoming all of you to take a part of that, because we opened also public consultation. So now we are collecting evidence and experiences from our stakeholders to where we should focus next to simplify the things in digital rule book.
Yeah, EU is open for business.
Why now? Like, what is the change? Because to me, as a founder, like ex-founder, it feels the last years a little bit more focused on like using paper trail to reduce risk kind of mindset. What changed in the last years?
Of course, we see that the competition is very hard globally, and clearly we see that Europe is too slowly and too bureaucratic. So we want to make Europe faster and simpler, easier for the businesses, and especially, of course, we want to encourage everybody to innovate and invest in Europe. And we see that we have too much bureaucracy here, and we have to clearly now cut this red tape. So it's about our competitiveness, about our future, and very important that we are doing it in the European level, but of course all the member states should also look their own rules here.
I mean, Europe is like priding itself of the premium life, right? The quality of life we have. In a way that quality of life comes out of premium jobs, and those premium jobs exist because we have premium companies that produce tier one that are leaders worldwide. And if you don't produce the next generation of that, we can't have this premium life. So like I personally, number one, cookie banners hopefully soon gone, and number two, I'm really looking forward to any regulation simplification we can do here, because we need this massive new generation of companies. Which brings me to you, Miki. Why did you sell to an American company and not just like, I don't know, do an IPO, raise more money? Like what was the trade-off for you? What was the motivation?
Yeah, I mean, when we ended up like selling the company to DoorDash, like we were in the process of raising our pre-IPO round of around $1.1 billion. So we had a very conscious decision moment between going to an IPO or joining forces with DoorDash. And we were looking at an IPO, and like the issue we ended up in is that like the best IPO location purely rationally for our company would have been in the US, without even having a business in the US. Which is, I think, one of the things that we need to work in Europe. Like, there's regulatory topics. There's like the fact that like we still have stock exchanges on country by country level. There's also the fact that like American investors tend to be more forward-leaning when it comes to growth companies and technology companies. And then ultimately, not having a business in the US, it was kind of like, this is going to be a huge burden for the company to be listed, overseas when you don't have people there as a starting point. And at the same time, like DoorDash is obviously like the category leader in the US market. The bigger thing for us, though, than that was that like global scale really matters in our industry. And we didn't have enough global scale as a standalone company, but together with DoorDash, we have enough global scale. Because our industry is a very competitive industry. Like if companies want to win in large markets, like we're competing in, like for Germany, for instance, like the amounts of investment that go into winning in these kind of markets are really, really high. And if you're a smaller company with like, a business in Europe, it's not going to be enough to be able to fight in all the global battles. So like, I think there was also an element of our industry having this kind of global nature that's like really important for us. But I think like it's different for different industries, but like the thing that I picked up from the Wolt journey is that I want to make sure that there's more and larger companies coming out of Europe. I think like world is a better place if it's not going to be a bipolar world between China and the US, but we have like a third pole, which is Europe. But right now, the reality is that we're not there yet. Like I really love, if I look at what I see in Slush today, like I really love what's going on today compared to what was going on 10 or 15 years ago. So I think we're accelerating, but the reality is that we are not there yet. Like out of the 25 biggest companies in the world right now, 0 are European. 20 years ago, 1/3, 8 were European. This is the thing we need to change.
And even the big ones we have, are not public companies. We couldn't even invest in many cases. And like I'm an investor in like 100 plus companies, and if one of my founders would actually list in Europe, there's a non-zero chance that some of the people on the board would like move very much against this, because you basically accept a discount because you go into a smaller stock market. And the American stock markets right now are the biggest. If you want a massive exit, you have to go there right now. Which brings me to the next question for you, is very recently Merz actually sat in favor of creating a pan-European IPO market. And I know this is very early, but like what's the latest here, like the inside knowledge?
It's clearly one of the biggest obstacles, of course, for our startups, really access to finance, access to capital. Because when we look now our basis, I think we have a very good starting point where we are. For example, in AI, we have 8,000 European startups who are developing AI. So it's a huge potential. But then when we look how much we have scale-ups, so it's amount to same number of startups that are established in the European Union annually than in USA, often more in the European Union when we look at the startups, but only 8% of the scale-ups are in the European Union and 60% in USA. So it clearly tells that our startups, they have to move to USA to scale up their business because of bigger access to bigger markets and especially access to capital. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we are now working very intensively, also in the Commission side, to make sure that we can remove the barriers between the member states, that we can really create one single market, and also to have access to capital to our small companies here in the European Union. We have a lot of money in the European Union. For example, our families, our households, they have more than 30 trillion euros in bank savings accounts. So it's also something in the European culture that our households and families, they are putting their money to savings accounts. It's same in Finland. There is more money in savings accounts than ever in Finland. So that's why we are also now trying to create that kind of instruments that we can also more intensified private citizens also to invest small part of their savings. But this is very important, access to capital, and I think we have to also look at the stock markets here. And of course it's very promising, for example, that in Germany, Chancellor Merz, for example, was speaking in favor of that.
I know it's very early to tell, but is there any horizon timeline, or is it just too early to tell yet for an actual European stock market?
There is not, in the European Commission, we don't have that kind of initiative. We are working with the Savings and Investment Union now, and of course we are looking different elements which could be included to that. And of course that is certainly something that we have to look. And also we are trying to encourage also that kind of mergers of stock markets already, but one stock maybe it's quite big step.
You spoke before about us having a lot of startups, not enough scale-ups, which basically means acceleration is the core problem. And you're one of the few founders who actually managed to build a company in Europe on a unicorn scale, but also managed to get into multiple markets. What does it actually take to make this happen in Europe, based on your experience?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm not sure our company would exist without the European Union. So I think it's very easy to criticize the EU and forget the fact that without the EU, we would be a bunch of 27 countries that are completely different. So I think the EU has already created a more even playground, which is especially important for new companies. Because again, if you are a large company, you're going to have the resources to deal with the regulatory landscape of another country being different. But if you come from a country of 5 million people, you've raised 2 million and you have 15 employees, country number 2 being easier to launch is very bloody important. And that's what EU did for us. I think in Europe what I see is that companies have to be built for complexity. When I compare what I see in the US and China and what I see in Europe is that Chinese and American companies tend to deal with the complexity of scale. How do you get to scale and how do you deal with scale? In Europe, you deal with the complexity of all these regulatory landscapes, and every country is a bit different, and you need to have if I look at Wolt as an example, what we've had to really productize is just the complexity of over 30 countries, including over 20 countries in Europe, and how do you operate in all of these countries, and what are the local nuances of what every country requires. And I think like what we need in Europe is that we just need to continue on this journey of like going from 27 to 1 in as many things as possible. We might not be able to go to one language, at least very quickly, but like there's a lot of things we can do in the realms of like, how does it really become a single market for, for a business? How does it become a single market for labor? Do you need to have 27 legal entities? I think one issue I see in Europe is that, we have 27 countries competing with each other for, which country is going to get which industries and which companies and so forth. Then I look at the US, it's not like there's 50 states competing against each other for everything. Like it's, you're building stuff like US-wide, and this is the thing that we need to change in the US. But I think, you need to start with the positive, which is that I think the EU has already been a powerful initiative when it comes to creating a better playground for building businesses and serving customers in Europe. The issue is that we are still like 10% of the way. Like we have so much room to go.
Yeah. You mentioned right now, like in the US, you have an infrastructure. Like for example, like in the US, almost every startup picks a Delaware Inc. Like you go to Stripe Atlas, 5 clicks, you have a website, as you have a company, sorry, and you send standard documents to investors. Like you can do all of that very quickly. A lot of European founders are doing the same. They just pick a Delaware Inc. versus, for example, a Finnish legal entity, which I forgot how it's called.
OY.
OY. Because many investors don't know how even the entity is called. Would you recommend European founders to pick a US entity, or does it matter from your point of view?
I mean, I'm a European in the sense that like I have a lot of sense for like I would like to work on things that contribute back to our like local communities. That's something that I personally feel very, very strongly about. But at the same time, if you're in a competitive market, if you are like not acting in the rational interest of the company and your competition is, you're not going to win. Yep. I think it's different for different industries. Like the positive thing I can say is that I remember before the rise of the gaming industry in Finland, for instance, starting with Rovio and Angry Birds and continuing with Supercell, like it was a conversation to be had with investors about like whether you should reincorporate in Delaware to be able to raise like American venture funding, for instance. After Supercell, that was no longer a conversation. Sure. So I think there's a point also about like seeing success stories and kind of proving that you can build these highly valuable, fast growth companies also with an OY as an example. So I don't think it's as simple as saying that it's always better to, for instance, be a Delaware Inc. versus like incorporating in Europe. And noting that Finland is a very good country for business, it might not be the case in another country. I think when it becomes topical for where you're incorporated is, for instance, that if you are a new company in a new industry, if you are able to become the American market leader, it's highly likely that you're in the pole position to become a global leader. It's a lot more difficult to do the same out of Europe. So for a lot of companies, like you might need to go to the US to be able to, maximize your chances of success. And then the question is, are you going to have like an incorporation in Europe even if you're doing most of the things in the US? But it's very industry specific. Like you look at Israel, and a lot of Israeli founders have built their R&D and founded their company and operated out of Israel while their go-to-market is in the US. So I don't think it's black and white. But I do think that it's crazy that we have 27 different incorporations that you need to do to be able to operate in all of Europe. You should have one company and you can operate in all of Europe. That should be the ambition level.
Which brings us perfectly to one of the number one things that the current commission wants to do for startups, which is called the 28th regime. What is the 28th regime and what is its goal?
Yeah, this is exactly we are working also on now. In the same time, when we want to remove barrier between the member states and create one capital markets union for our startups and for our innovative companies, we are also now preparing something called 28 regime, and it means that it's one legal framework for innovative companies that you could operate all over in the European Union under one legislation. So it's about corporate law, but now we are also looking which other legislations we are also including that, and our idea has been that also labor law and taxation should be part of this regime. So the companies who want to operate all over in Europe, that they should have just one legislation, one corporate law under which they would be able to operate. And yesterday, when I proposed this, my first simplification package on digital field, I also proposed so-called digital business wallet, and it's already important part of our 28 regime. So it means because in many countries in the European Union, you have already that kind of digital tool that that you can operate with the public authorities via digital channel. But now we are also building interoperability for that, so that in one country you can operate all over in the European Union with public authorities with this single digital point. And the public authorities, they are not, they can't anymore ask papers from you, so they have to accept everything digitally. So it's part of our proposal also. And of course, it makes possible also the business-to-business interactions in trustworthy environment.
I quickly want to jump back to something you just said. You said that you're also thinking about including employment and taxation. If the goal of startups is to build the next generation of massive premium companies, is it likely that, for example, Germany would say now our next generation biggest employers will be managed by Brussels law? Or like France will be like our biggest taxpayers will be managed by Brussels law? Like, what is the trade-off here, and is it worth it? How do you make it possible, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yes, we are now working with this 28 regime, and of course we have to now look very carefully at which legislations we are including to that and what will be the scope of the companies also. We just had a public consultation that it was closing in end of September, and we received 1,500 answers from different companies. And of course we have been also analyzing now the expectations, and it seems, for example, that our stakeholders, our innovative companies, they don't want that the scope, for example, of the companies is too limited, because of course if we are, for example, just having startups in the scope, what about when you are scaling up, then you are maybe not in the scope anymore. So it seems that stakeholders, for example, they want to have very large scope, that everybody who would use this 28 regime should have the possibility, for example, for that. And it's true that when we speak about taxation, for example, it's competence of the member states, and often it's very complicated to make European decisions in the European level. So we have to look that we are not entering it into too difficult situation with that. We want to be ambitious, but also realistic at the same time.
The biggest fear that I could almost have is that like civil servants would like then decide who gets this and who doesn't, or the moment you start actually scaling, all of a sudden it's like, could you please reincorporate into a German GmbH now? And you lose 6 months, or like you lose the company effectively. Is there a way that you could almost like split it, that you could say there is sandboxes for employment and taxation, but the entity itself only standardizes as corporate law, and that way anything can use it, even if you're doing a coffee shop company, a hot dog company, or anything that doesn't matter how innovative it is, as long as the goal is to get investment and get big.
This is our starting point, that now we have a corporate law there, and then now we look to other elements, that what we are including to that. But I think it's a good idea also you had that we could have that kind of test beds also, and sandboxes, for example, for different ideas. And I think we have to be also innovative here, that we can really help our companies to operate in the European Union and cut bureaucracy.
I have one more question. Because I wear this hat.
Yeah.
Have you heard about EO Inc? And I assume yes.
Yes, I have. And in fact, in last week I was taking part in a web summit in Lisboa, and I met your colleague there.
Yes.
And even I received that kind of cap with EO Inc text, but I didn't know that you are going to wear it, because otherwise I could have put my own also.
I have one as well. You'd be very effective.
I would get that photo
Maybe
afterwards if it's
everybody's
possible.
having them. Yeah.
So for anybody who doesn't know,
they said that it was very limited, amount of these caps. But now I heard that several people are having.
I'm a signatory of the initiative, so I guess like all of the signatories got one.
We are doing this completely voluntary. It's basically a project by the European startup ecosystem to do a complete legal proposal to show how this could work for startups, because startups by itself are extremely complicated. And we basically did with the best legal teams, Oric, Burden, but multiple others, and 100 plus open source contributors, like a legal proposal how this could be set up. And the main suggestion we have is standardized corporate law, so that incorporation is fully digital in a new registry online, that investments is like one standard click with a standard document, stock options would be fixed, but you keep employment and taxation locally, with the idea that then the countries do not have to limit who gets access. You can still consider doing regulatory sandboxes for like frontier tech or innovation or certain industries like food delivery or anything else, but those would be sandboxes. And if you join the sandbox, if you drop out of the sandbox, it doesn't affect your ability to raise and continue growing, and that's the whole idea behind EO Inc.
Yeah, and I think your input is of course very important now, especially when we are finalizing our proposal on 28 regime. We have the plan that we should publish our proposal in the first quarter of next year, and of course now the next weeks will be very important now when we are finalizing also this work.
Let's quickly repeat this. The idea for the 28th regime, for the standard legal entity, you want to propose Q1 next year.
Yeah, our proposal.
Which basically means now almost. Like you have to figure, this is like...
It's very soon.
That's soon. Like there's a different kind of velocity it feels right now. Is this fair to say?
Yes. So we really have to speed up the processes because we see that, of course, the competition is very hard and we have great potential in our startups and we want to make sure that Europe is place for innovations and investments and also for scaling up.
Miki, you were one of our signers, actually one of our first signers, and I thank you again, among 18,000 other unicorn founders and unicorn investors, and every association, startup association in Europe. So thank us to everybody who supported the project. We get 28th regime, EU Inc., whatever it's called, and let's say it's perfect. Check bug, we're done. Europe is now competitive. Is this a silver bullet? Everything's solved?
Yeah, like in our business, we like to say that there are no silver bullets.
Damn it.
Oftentimes in life, people like to think that there's this one thing, and if we do this one thing, everything is going to be amazing. And like, very rarely is it like it is so. Like, and I think it's the same thing here. Like, we're going to need 1,000 things that are going to accumulate. And like, it's not just enough to make Europe the best continent in the world to start a company. We need to build these companies into really, really large companies. And like, I'll give you an example. Currently in Europe, there's over 100 telecom operators for 450 million people. In the US, there's 5 telecom operators for 340 million people. Why do we need over 100 telecom operators in Europe? Like, that also means that like, if there's something happening in the telecom industry on the global stage, all the European players are going to be really small compared to their like American and Chinese counterparts. So I think one thing is that like, we need to make Europe a better single market so that you have like organically built companies that are going to become bigger and be EU-wide. The other thing is that like, I think, if I look at like our competition laws and the fact that, if you want to have European companies merge and they have any overlap, it becomes way more complex for the two companies to do that than for like a company from the outside to acquire one of those companies, which is crazy because you should have like synergy, not dis-synergy from having two companies that have overlap. But the issue is like competition law and the fact that we have 27 different competition laws in Europe. And if you are operating in a pan-European like setup as a company, it's going to be very difficult to create like European champions. So I think like the general thing is that like we need to make Europe better for creating European champions. Like, and it's not going to be enough. We need to fix the things related to the early stage and the startup phase, but like there's still a lot of things that we need to do to be able to create companies that on the global stage are going to be some of the leading companies of their industries. I think that's the measure. If we had one KPI, the KPI would be how many of the most important companies of each of these industries come from Europe.
I like this. Like, there was like a question like when we will see the first $1 trillion company. It doesn't matter. The goal is within the top 10, top 25, whatever number pick, there needs to be a threshold of European companies, and those need to be the biggest in the world, because those will define our role globally. Those will make us as a place create all this premium life, premium quality of life, and everything like that. And you can only do this if you have a dynamic, large market that's actually operative.
Agreed. So like I think I said, we have a lot of work ahead of us. Like whatever the case, I'm an optimist. Like if I look at what I've seen in the tech industry in the last like 15 or so years that I've been a part of this industry, is that we've come a very long way. Like in Europe, we used to talk about that there's no venture capital for companies being founded out of Europe. Like then we started to get investment from like foreign venture investors, and then we started to actually get like domestic European like sizable venture investment funds. And like I think of so many of these things, if someone came to tell me 15 years ago that this is where we are 15 years later, I would be like, that's an incredible development. It's not enough. It's not enough, but we've come a very, very long way already. Like the thing is that we just need to continue to accelerate from here.
What I like about the current proposal that we have in the current commission is that they feel almost like on the level of ambition as the euro. Like if I would imagine like convincing every country to give up their local currency and agreeing that there's like now one standard for a currency, that's insane to imagine, But like we made that happen, and now we have, for example, with the 28th regime, a similar discussion where the idea is to create like one standard legal entity in all of Europe, and that's on the level of Europe. Like that's like Euro ambition almost, right? How do you think about this? Like, are we able to do this?
Yes, I'm very, of course, committed to work towards that, and it's very encouraging to see that all our leaders in different member states, they are very strongly supporting this 28 regime, and competitiveness of Europe, together with our security, is the top priorities for everybody. And I also see that now when we are focusing also very much to security, it's also giving a great boost for our technologies, because now our member states, they are investing heavily, hundreds of billions every year extra to defense industry, and our recommendation from the Commission side is that member states should use 10% of these investments to frontier technologies like AI, quantum, semiconductors, cybersecurity technologies, space technologies, because it's super important for our defense industry to create their competitiveness, but we have to also now create an ecosystem with our startups. We have hundreds of startups now who are working with dual-use technologies or with the defense technologies, and now we have to really bring our startups together with our defense industry and with our military forces, and I think this is also giving a great boost for our technological competitiveness.
Miki, Henna, thank you very much for this discussion, and it's an honor to have you here. We hope to have you here next year as well, and thank you for answering all our questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.